Frank Hyder is a well-known, renowned visual artist. When he started to become an artist, he thought the journey would be a straightforward progression. Over the years, he has discovered that the road has many twists and turns, numerous hills and valleys, and countless challenges. Through this series of short stories, tales, and remembrances, his hope is that these will offer some valuable insight into the life of an artist and what's involved in becoming an artist. In the end, he has come to realize that he is not a painter or sculptor or anything in particular. He is more simply a creative person with great passion and love for the process of making art concerning people and the world around us, who shares his artworks with the public. Join us now as we listen to another episode of A Life in Art series.
Almost from my very beginnings as an artist, I was always experimenting with paint and materials. My earliest paintings I was making using the unused paint left over by relatives who were busy making paint-by-number paintings, whether they were making paintings of horses or churches or Elvis, I really don't know, but the paint they left over was what I was using to make my paintings. Anyway, when I went to art school, I started experimenting with crayons and unusual paper. I also got involved with, I took a couple of classes where I was taught about how old master paint mediums were made, and I was involved with heating unboiled linseed oil and adding beeswax and a little bit of white lead to it to create a very, very lush painting medium. And so I had this kind of dialogue with the material and how it was made and how it was used that really was very fundamental and started very early on. Well, that continued so that as my career developed, I found myself working in watercolor and working in oil paint and working in acrylic paint and working in clay and in ceramic glazes and wood and all different manner. So anyway, early on, I had this interest in materials. So in about 1980, I went to a art conference in Philadelphia, which was designed for arts college professors and schools to visit. And in the showroom area, they had different art material manufacturers who had set up tables. What happened that year was the first year that Golden Acrylic Paint was doing their very first industrial presentation of their product. And I wandered up to their table, and they had all these really interesting materials they made. And they let me just start using the material, and I started making little paintings on their table. And as I painted, it attracted a crowd of attention. So they learned that if you go to one of these trade shows and you have a demonstrator there who's using the material, you can really get a lot more interest in your product. So they never really forgot that. They always kind of stayed in touch with me over the years. And anyway, when I was in Venezuela and I was experimenting with making these big sheets of paper using plant life and other things, I sent samples of my paper to the people at Golden Acrylics, and they ran it through all of the standardized tests to see how durable and good the quality was. And they gave me a full report on that quality. They didn't charge me for any of that. And so I took that report and some samples of that paper, and I went to a art materials conference in New York City. And while I was there, I walked around and talked to different manufacturers of paper and paint, showing them my sample and trying to talk to them about making some kind of arrangement where we could make paper together or do something. Anyway, in all of that, I met this guy who gave me his card, and he said, look, if you come to the West Coast for any reason at all, let me know, and I'd like to have you take you out to lunch and show you what we do. So about 2 months later, I was headed out to Portland, Oregon to do a show, and I sent him an email. And he wrote me back and he said, well, I'll pick you up at your hotel at 10 o'clock in the morning. So I told him where my hotel was, etc. And it was a snowy day, and he showed up at 10 o'clock. So I figured, well, we're going to go to his factory and then we'll go to lunch. Well, we did go to his factory, and it was cold and damp and wet, and there was all this paper all around. And I noticed a big pile of paper that was in a very odd shape. They were about 6 inches wide and about 12 inches long. And I asked what that was for, and he explained. He says, well, we make that paper for a company in Great Britain that makes handmade shoes, and they need that size paper to trace the foot on that they can make the shoe fit exactly. And anyway, he said, we need to make so much of it when we make it, but we don't sell it all at once, so we store it, and as they order it, we ship it. He said, I wish we could think of something else to do with the paper. And I quickly said, well, I can think of something you could do with the paper, and I explained to him my idea. I said it's the perfect shape for either a dress designer, a fashion designer, to draw individual standing figures on, or it's the perfect shape for a landscape artist to make drawings of landscape on. And he wrote all this stuff down, and then we kept talking. He took me around the factory, and we went to another factory. Then we went to someplace else. Anyway, it came 10:30 at night. We're still together. And as he drives me back to my hotel, he says, well, how much do you charge to be a consultant? And I said, what's a consultant? I don't know what that is. And he explained, and he said, you could come like you did today. He said, how about if I gave you $300 a day and $1,000 worth of material every time you did this? And I said, well, that sounds reasonable to me. So I said, if you want me to do it again, I'll be at your service. So anyway, about a month and a half later, he calls me on the phone, and he said, I just thought I'd give you a call and let you know that your idea for that landscape sketchbook, we took your idea and we've produced it, and it's now the best-selling sketchbook in the United States. And he said, and we'd like to bring you out to Denver, Colorado, where we're doing a National Education Association Art Teachers Conference, and we'd like you to help us talk to people about our product. So they brought me out there, and then as we're riding in the car from the hotel to the convention center, he was asking me questions, and I started talking about the history of sketchbooks. When we were done, we get to the convention center. He said, look, by the way, I'd like you to write down what you were just telling me and give it to me. And so about a month later, he contacted me and sent me a sketchbook. And what they had done was they took the words that I'd written about the history of sketchbooks and printed them inside of a sketchbook and included one of my images on the sketchbook. And he said, what we also want to do is take a look at a bunch of your drawings. And they produced several different sketchbooks with my drawings on the cover. And for all of this, they were giving me a payment of art materials. They spread out over several years. So for me, it was pretty good, and it was also kind of nice to know that somebody thought I had some good ideas. Well, the real thrill came. I was in New York City on 57th Street on a cold winter night, and I'm walking down the street, and there's Lee's Art Store, which was right next to Carnegie Hall, and they had an entire window display of sketchbooks, which were all my drawings, my sketchbook designs, etc. And so it's a completely different arena than what I usually do or make or anything like that. But at the same time, it just shows there's another place where an artist can make their mark and have an impact on the art world in general. So my dialogue with these different manufacturers has continued to the point where I have a museum show, and I oftentimes get a contribution from gold and acrylic towards the cost of printing a catalog or doing a promotional ad or something like that. So it's a dialogue that starts with using, and you can become familiar with these people and actually contribute to what they're doing. And in the end, that's a back and forth, which is positive for both sides. It's, again, something I had no idea existed when I went to art school, but it's something I found that's out there.
Thank you for listening. If you have questions or suggestions for future episodes, please reach out to Frank Hyder on Facebook or Instagram. We hope to see you at one of the next A Life in Art episodes.